Hey, nonprofit founders. So let's be honest. How many of you have thought about applying for grants but felt completely lost? Or maybe you've actually applied for a grant and got absolutely nothing, silence, or worse, a rejection letter. See, I get it. Grant funding sounds like the answer to all your problems, but here's the reality check. Most nonprofits are not ready for grants. Grants are not the first step, and grants should never be your only source of funding. I know. It's not what you wanted to hear, but stick with me because today I'm going to show you exactly how to get grant ready so you stop wasting time on applications that don't get funded. You're going to build a funding strategy that doesn't depend on grants alone, and you'll set your nonprofit up for success with the right steps in the right order. And because I don't do fluff, I've got a free checklist that will walk you through these steps in real time. If you are on the live call, it is in the chat all ready for you. If you wind up seeing this in replay on YouTube, it will be in the description. All right, so in case we haven't met, hi, I'm Alesha Mathis. I've spent over 15 years helping nonprofit leaders like you figure out how to fund their mission without burning out or relying on hope as a strategy. Through my work at Mathis Nonprofit Services, I've supported new and small nonprofits in building fundable programs, getting grant ready, and actually landing the funding they need, not just dreaming about it. And I've also written a book called Launching a Successful Grant Program, and there it is, where I break down what it really takes to equip nonprofits to assess their readiness, build internal capacity, strategically plan for grant acquisition, and successfully manage and grow grant funded programs from the inside out. So the bottom line is if you're feeling unsure or overwhelmed about grants, you're in the right place. I've been there, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what I wish every nonprofit founder knew before sending out their first application. So grab your coffee, or in my case, water, your notebook, and let's get into it. All right, so let me introduce you to a founder we'll call Lisa. She started a nonprofit to help at-risk youth find safe after-school programs. She did everything right, registered her 501c3, built an amazing program, and started applying for grants right away. And guess what? She got rejected over and over and over. So why? She wasn't grant ready. She had a powerful mission, but her programs weren't well documented. Her financials were a mess, and she had no connections with funders. So here's what Lisa learned the hard way. Grant funders don't just give money to great causes. They give money to well-run, financially stable organizations. So before you write a single word of a grant proposal, you need to be able to answer these questions. Does your nonprofit have strong leadership and governance? Do you have a clear and measurable program? Are your financials in order? Have you built relationships with funders? If you can't confidently answer yes to these, you're not grant ready yet. But don't worry, because we're going to fix that right now. All right, so I have identified 4 key pillars of grant readiness. And so we're going to walk through them and let you know exactly what you need for them. So the first pillar is organizational structure and governance. So what is it? Funders want to know that your nonprofit is legit and well run before they invest. Governance ensures your organization has clear leadership, decision-making processes, and accountability structures. So why it's important to funders is a well-structured nonprofit shows stability, professionalism, and longevity. A strong board ensures oversight and financial responsibility, and clear policies protect against mismanagement and legal issues. All right, so how do we become grant ready in this pillar? You're going to build a diverse, engaged board with skills in fundraising, finance, and leadership. Draft and implement bylaws and policies for decision making and conflict resolution, and then maintain an active strategic plan that aligns with your funding needs. All right, so here are your action steps to take to assess this. So take 15 minutes this week to assess. Number one, is my board actually helping, or do I need to recruit stronger members? Number two, do I have a written strategic plan with clear goals? And number three, do I have policies for handling money, hiring, and reporting? All right, the second pillar is program development and impact. So, what is this? See, funders don't fund organizations, they fund strong, measurable programs that create impact. Your nonprofit needs clear goals, structured programming, and evidence based results. So, why it's important to funders? Well, funders want to see tangible outcomes and a well documented plan for implementation. Programs with measurable success are more likely to receive long term funding, and organizations that track impact and evaluation stand out from competitors. All right, so how do we become grant ready in this particular pillar? You need to develop a clear problem statement explaining what your nonprofit solves. Number two, structure your programs with specific activities, timelines, and desired results. And then last, set up a data collection system to track outcomes and prove effectiveness. All right, so what is your action step? You would go through your program descriptions. Are they clear, specific, and measurable? And if not, fix them before you start grant writing. All right, the third pillar is financial management. So, financial management is the system your nonprofit uses to budget, track, and report how funds are received and spent. It includes tools like budgets, financial reports, bookkeeping systems, and internal records. All right, so why is this important? Well, funders need to trust that your organization can manage money responsibly. Clean financials signal professionalism, accountability, and sustainability. Inaccurate or incomplete records are a major red flag for grant makers. All right, so how do we become grant ready in this particular pillar? Well, you're going to create a realistic annual budget and keep it updated as things change. You're going to set up a system to track income and expenses, so QuickBooks, spreadsheet, or nonprofit accounting software. And then you're going to develop basic fiscal policies like check signing procedures and reimbursement protocols. And then last, you're going to ensure you can generate financial reports, profit loss, balance sheet, etc., when requested by a funder. Okay, so here's your action step. If you don't already have a working budget or financial tracking system, make that your top priority this week. Even a simple spreadsheet is better than nothing. All right, before we move on to relationship building with funders, I am going to check to see if there's any questions in the chat, and I'm going to take a sip of water. All right. Looks like we're good so far. All right, so now let's talk about building relationship building with funders. So, relationship building is about connecting with funders before you apply and maintaining those relationships after funding decisions are made. It turns your application from a cold ask into a continuation of a conversation. So, why is this important to funders? Well, Funders want to invest in nonprofits they know, trust, and understand. Relationships allow you to learn what a funder really wants to see in an application. And last, staying connected after funding shows you're a long term partner, not just a one time transaction. All right, so how do we become grant ready in this area? You're going to identify funders who align with your mission and start engaging with them. You're going to attend webinars, networking events, or information sessions hosted by funders. So start keeping a lookout in your community for those different events. Next, you're going to reach out with a brief, respectful intro email before you apply. You're going to ask smart questions. This lets them know that you're actually interested in what they do. And then last, after applying, you're going to send a thank you message. Even if you don't get funded, and then you're going to keep them updated on your work. This will help you build that relationship. So here's your action step. Make a list of 3 potential funders, research their priorities, and follow them on LinkedIn and send an introductory email this week. All right, now let's talk about building a sustainable funding strategy. Wait, before we do that, let me make sure we don't have any questions in the chat. And if you were later getting on here and you're on the Zoom live, we've got today's workbook, summary notes, and the grant readiness checklist all in the chat. Those things, if you're watching on a replay, will be in the description on YouTube. Okay. All right, so let's move on then to building a sustainable funding strategy. So let's talk about why grants can't be your only funding source. So here's a hard truth. Grants should only be about 20% of your funding strategy. If your entire nonprofit depends on one grant, what happens when that grant runs out? You're in trouble. Most nonprofits struggle with sustainability because they rely too much on grants without diversifying their funding sources. So grants should support your organization, not sustain it. So think about it like this. If your nonprofit had to operate for an entire year without receiving a single grant, could it survive? The answer is no. It's time to shift your funding strategy. So here's how to build a balanced funding strategy so your nonprofit thrives even when grants are delayed or denied. Number 1 is individual giving. Monthly donors, major gifts, peer-to-peer fundraising, those kinds of things are good for you to have as part of your strategy. Number 2, corporate sponsorships. This includes business partnerships and employee giving programs. Number 3, earned income. This is when you sell products, ticketed events, membership fees, that kind of thing. Be careful. There is a point where the IRS sees earned income, though, as taxable income. So you have to be careful of that. But it can, up to that taxable point, can be a good way to diversify some funding. And then number 4 is fundraising events. These are your annual campaigns, your galas, and your community fundraisers. And then last, of course, are grants. They are strategic and not desperate. All right, so let's talk just a little bit more about these different models. So we have individual giving. So having a strong base of recurring individual donors can stabilize your funding and make you less dependent on grants. So develop a monthly donor program and build relationships with major donors. Businesses are often willing to Businesses are often willing to sponsor nonprofit programs in exchange for visibility. And so identify corporations aligned with your mission and pitch them opportunities to contribute. Next, we have earned income. So many nonprofits create sustainable revenue streams by offering services, memberships, or educational workshops. So, could your nonprofit charge for an offering while keeping mission alignment? Something to think about. Next, we have fundraising events. So, while events take planning, they are excellent for community engagement and donor stewardship. Annual giving campaigns and peer to peer fundraising can also boost revenue. And then, last, of course, we have grants. And grants are important, but should be approached strategically. So you focus on long term partnerships rather than one off grants that won't sustain your nonprofit in the long run. This grants are also not a short term money fix. It can take 3 to 6 months to even be awarded a grant. So this this is all long term. This is long term thinking when you're talking about grants. Some of the other things, the individual giving, the corporate sponsorships, earned income, fundraising events, those things you can actually see money a lot faster than if it's a grant. All right, so let's talk about your action step for this particular segment. So you're going to write down where your funding is coming from right now. And do you have at least 3 different sources? If not, it's time to diversify even further. All right, so let's go back to Lisa. So Lisa originally depended 100% on grants. When her first big grant ended, she was scrambling. But instead of chasing more grants, she focused on diversification. She launched a monthly donor program and converted one-time donors into committed givers. She formed a partnership with local businesses, which covered event costs in exchange for sponsorship recognition. She added a small membership fee for program participants, creating a steady earned income stream. And then she ran an annual giving campaign that brought in $15,000 from individuals alone. So within 1 year, Lisa's nonprofit was funding 60% of its operations without grants. So now, when she applies for grants, funders see her organization as strong, stable, and less risky to fund. All right, so here is your action step. Identify one funding source you can improve this month and set a goal to grow it. All right, I'm going to check before we move on to our action plan, which is a get grant ready in 30 days. I'm going to walk you through week by week what to be doing. I'm going to check to make sure that we don't have any questions going on in the chat. And I'm going to take some water. I am fighting a cold, so I have to stay hydrated. All right. All right, no questions. Let's move on. Okay, we're going to get step by step into your 30-day action plan. If you do one item a day for the next 4 weeks or 30 days, you will be so much closer to grant ready, if not grant ready, than you've ever been. All right, so let's walk through this plan. And this uses the core principles of grant readiness and sustainable funding. So we're putting everything into action. So focus on these each week. Week 1, assess and strengthen your nonprofit's foundation. So day 1, conduct a self-assessment using the grant readiness checklist that is available to you. Identify gaps in your board, financials, and programs that need attention. You're going to schedule a board meeting to align leadership with funding goals. So your next board meeting, that can be an agenda item, is aligning leadership with funding goals. And then you're going to draft or update your strategic plan to reflect measurable objectives. Now, let me tell you, the strategic plan is actually not only really important to you and your nonprofit in moving it forward, but a strategic plan, if you are within 5 years of existing, that is one of the things that funders will ask you for. And a strategic plan is not a business plan. It's a hybrid from the corporate strategic plan and business plan. But a nonprofit strategic plan is different. So make sure you have that. And then your action step is to identify 3 areas where your nonprofit needs improvement and create a simple action plan for each. All right, let me check. No questions. All right, moving on then to week 2. Okay, so in week 2, you're going to build financial stability and transparency. So you're going to create or refine your annual budget to clearly define income and expenses. You should have one section for income and one section for expenses. And you're going to list out exactly line by line what each of those things are. And then you're going to implement or update a financial tracking system. So either QuickBooks, you can use Excel, or you can use a CRM. And then the last thing is you're going to review past financial reports and ensure compliance with nonprofit financial best practices. And you should be giving those financial reports out at every board meeting. So make sure you're doing that and those are in your meeting minutes. All right. And then the last thing you're going to do is identify one additional revenue source you can strengthen, whether it's monthly donors, earned income, corporate partnerships, or maybe just expanding your individual donors, etc. All right, so your action step is to choose one area of financial management to refine and set a goal to complete it by the end of the week. All right, and just so you know, I have also included the summary notes for today, and those do include these action steps. So if you're having a hard time keeping up, don't worry. Just download that and you'll be able to get it. All right. Week 3, we're going to strengthen your grant readiness and fundraising strategy. So you're going to develop a case for support that clearly defines your mission, programs, and impact. And then you're going to gather your impact data, your testimonials, and your success stories to showcase to funders. The next thing is you're going to research at least 3 grant opportunities that align with your nonprofit's mission. You don't want to try and force your mission to align with theirs. It should be a natural fit. And then last, draft an outline of a standard grant proposal to use for future applications. I like having that master proposal just because there are certain things that if you're writing for a program, it's going to be the same thing. Your background isn't going to change. There are just certain pieces to a grant proposal that just aren't going to change. It doesn't matter who you're writing it for or what you're writing it for. And so having that master proposal really helps make things a whole lot faster. All right, so your action step: identify one upcoming grant and create a rough draft of a letter of inquiry or a grant proposal. If you don't know how to create one of these, what one looks like, I do recommend the Grant Magic Use one-page proposal training. It's free. It goes through 10 common grant questions. It's in a very good order. I have actually written a letter of inquiry from that template and received $200 without doing anything else. So it is absolutely awesome. And I would recommend going and downloading that. Okay. And then week 4, build and strengthen funder relationships. So you're going to identify 3 potential funders and introduce your organization via email. You're going to attend at least one funder webinar or networking event, or sign up for one, because there may not be one the week that you're looking, but sign up for one. And then draft a funding stewardship plan to maintain relationships with current and future funders. And then last, you're going to develop a year-long fundraising plan that includes grants, individual giving, and corporate sponsorships. This is going to take you off of the roller coaster of funding and help keep everything in line, and so that you know when funding opportunities are going to be available throughout a 12-month timeline. All right, so your action step, you're going to send at least one funding outreach email to a potential funder and schedule a follow-up conversation. So your takeaways I want you to have from this part is that small, consistent steps lead to grant success. So when you follow this 30-day action plan, you'll set your nonprofit up for sustainable funding success. Grants won't feel like a guessing game anymore, and your nonprofit will be strategic, prepared, and positioned for funding opportunities. All right, so don't forget to download the Grant Readiness Checklist to track your progress. And we're going to stop for just a second. I'm going to grab some water. And while I do that, I want to know what's one step you'll commit to today. So let me know in the comments. And then we will move on to some common grant readiness mistakes. Okay, I have a question. Where's the best place to find potential, I'm assuming that's funders, to reach out to attend their networking events? Go to websites of funders nearby. Community foundations are good. There's usually one in areas. They'll often post. If you have an AFP, that's the Association of Professional Fundraisers. If they have a chapter nearby, that's a good list to get on, because they often will publish things. It's really a matter of doing local research and figuring out what you have locally, what foundations you have that will do that. So I hope that answers your question. If not, we can talk about it more. Okay, let me take one more sip. Like I said, I'm fighting a cold. It's been rough. Okay. All right. This is our last section. And so let's go through some common grant readiness mistakes, and we're going to talk about how to fix them. So most nonprofits struggle with grants, not because their cause isn't worthy, but because they make avoidable mistakes. So here are the 4 most common mistakes that stop nonprofits from getting funded and how to fix them before you apply. All right, so mistake number 1, you're applying for every grant available. And this is a problem because casting a wide net wastes time and resources on grants that don't align with your mission. Funders can tell when an application is generic or lacks clear connection. All right, so how are we going to fix this? So only apply for grants that align with your mission, programs, and funding needs. You're going to research funding history to see if they've funded nonprofits like yours before, and you find that on their 990s. All right. And then last, build relationships with funders before applying. And then we'll cover this next. All right. The next mistake is weak or non existent financial records. So it's a problem because funders won't invest in organizations that can't manage money well. If your books are disorganized, it's a red flag for mismanagement. So, how do we fix the financial problems? So, we're going to maintain accurate financial records. You're going to budget, you're going to have revenue and expenses. You're going to make sure you're tracking those things. You're going to use something like QuickBooks, Excel, or a nonprofit accounting tool to track finances. And then you're going to prepare financial statements in advance so you can attach them to applications. All right. The next mistake is no relationship with funders. And this is a problem because funders prefer to invest in organizations they know and trust. So cold applications have lower success rates than those with pre-existing connections. All right, so how do we fix this? You're going to attend funder webinars, networking events, and informal meetings. And that was a great question, and I hope I answered where to find those. And Chamber of Commerce might also be a good place to find some networking events. Just a thought. All right, so then you're going to introduce yourself to funders before applying. You're going to ask questions about their priorities. And I have actually contacted foundations in my area before and asked to have a sit-down meeting and came prepared with questions to ask them about, what kinds of things to fund. I even brought a few ideas and said, is this typically something you fund or would be interested in funding? And got some ideas that way. And then the last thing is follow up with funders. Even if you don't get funded, this keeps you on their radar. And if you can put together just once a quarter an email that you send to them saying, these are the great things we've done. This is how many people we've served, or, the impacts you're making. This can really help keep that relationship going and get them to trust you and like you. All right. And then the last mistake is unclear or unmeasurable program goals. So this is a problem because funders need proof that your nonprofit creates impact. They have people they have to answer to also with the money. So if you don't track results, funders can't see the return on investment of their grant, and they need that to be able to answer to their stakeholders. All right, so how are we going to fix this? You're going to clearly define the problem your nonprofit solves. You're going to set measurable goals. We will provide job training for 100 low-income adults in 2025 with a 75% job replacement rate. Notice that goal is SMART, so it's very dialed in. And then last, track impact data using pre- and post-program assessments. All right, so what is your action step? You're going to go through your current grant applications or your plans to apply and identify which of these mistakes you might be making, and then fix them before your next submission. All right, the one thing funders look for before funding you, I want you to really understand this. You can have a great cause, a strong application, and still not get funded. But why? Because funders care about one thing above all else, and that is trust. Funders want to know, can this organization responsibly manage our funds and create real impact? All right, so here's how to prove your nonprofit is a good investment before you even apply. One, show that you're financially stable. Funders won't give money to an organization that might go bankrupt mid project. So, how are we going to build trust? Keep a detailed budget, a financial tracking system, and a plan for long term sustainability. All right, number two, demonstrate that you can deliver results. See, funders don't fund dreams, they fund proven impact. All right, so how are we going to build this trust? You're going to use data, testimonials, and success stories to show that your nonprofit achieves measurable results. Number three, maintain transparency and accountability. Funders need evidence that their money is spent wisely. So, how are we going to build that trust? You're going to have a clear reporting process for tracking how grant funds are used. And then number four, build a relationship with funders before you need money. So the best applications aren't cold submissions, they're conversations that started long before the deadline. All right, so how are we going to build this trust? You're going to attend funder events, introduce yourself, and ask about their funding priorities before applying. All right, so your action step is to identify 3 ways your nonprofit can build more trust with funders this month. Then put them into action before your next grant application. All right, that is all for this masterclass. I got through it very quickly. I'm going to take some questions, but what I'm going to do, that's going to be all for the video on YouTube. So I'm going to stop the recording. Just want to make sure that you understand. Download my free grant readiness checklist in the description. Comment below what's one action step that you're going to take this week after listening to this class, and then subscribe for more videos. And I will see you in the next video.